Everyone's been chasing Queensland, Western Australia and South Australia for the past 2 years. But those markets have moved. What if I told you that the real opportunity might be brewing in Victoria? So in this video, I'm going to show you 3 markets under $500,000 that's showing early signs of turning and where I'm actively buying for clients as well. Hi, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jadhu Srikandan. I'm a buyer's agent for property investors and I buy properties all around the country using a data-driven approach. So if you want to work with me, then go to my website propertyframeworkbuyersagency.com.au and book a session with me there. In today's video, I'm going to talk mainly about Victoria, and I'm going to walk you through which specific markets I'm talking about where there are opportunities under 500,000 and what you need to be careful about when buying in those markets. I'm not trying to create any FOMO here, but I really do think that opportunities under 500,000 would soon be gone, because looking at how these markets are turning, it's only a matter of time before the prices rise above 500,000. Before I get into it, I want to start off with why I'm looking at Victoria. Why not Queensland? Why not Western Australia? Why not South Australia? Why am I particularly focusing on Victoria? And so let's just take one step back and see some numbers here. So basically what I'm doing here is that I'm going to look at major regional centers, even capital cities in Queensland, Western Australia, South Australia, and just look at their growth profile over the last 3 to 5 years. So I'm using hashtag here, a tool called hashtag, which I can easily use to look at these numbers. So for example, when I look at Townsville, so just come to the search column, key in Townsville, the greater area. So we're not looking at individual suburbs, we're looking at the whole Townsville. What I can immediately see when I come to the growth profile, I come down, I can see that it's done 65% over the last 3 years and then 101% over the last 5 years. A Townsville in Queensland. So what you got to do is put in other regional centers as well. For example, Rockhampton, Gladstone. You could put in Mackay. You could put in Ipswich. So just key in the area, the LGA into hashtag, and hashtag will automatically show you the growth profile for that area for the past 15 years. And one common thing that you would see is that the 3-year and the 5-year growth would be very significant. Now let's look at Western Australia. Now let's look at Bunbury. Okay, so I've already keyed in Bunbury here. I'm going to look at the growth profile in Bunbury. So when I look at Bunbury, I can see that 3 years it's done 67% and over the 5 years it's done 88%. Okay, now let's move to the city of Playford. Now this is actually in the northern suburbs of Adelaide. It used to be a very affordable place a couple of years ago, but things have changed now. When I look at the price curve here, I can see over the 3 years it did 49%, over the 5 years it did 103%. So basically what you can do, and what I've already done, is that key in every major regional center in these markets, in Queensland, Western Australia, South Australia, and some of the capital cities where you can still find affordable properties, and look at the growth profile, and you would see the same thing for all these markets. 3-year and 5-year growth very significant. Most suburbs, when you look at the price point, you can hashtag also shows you the price points of each suburb. You can also see that the price points have already moved above 500,000. Yes, there are some suburbs where you can still pick up something under 500, but is it worth it going there now after it's seen significant levels of growth? And that takes me to NSW and Victoria. In NSW, there are no opportunities under 500,000 that may be worth considering. And that's why I'm only focusing on Victoria. So Victoria, you can find properties under 500,000. The 3-5-year growth has been much slower as compared to these Queensland markets or Western Australian markets. Some of these markets in Victoria even went through a price decline, and that's the reason why I'm focusing on Victoria. So today I'm going to look at 3 markets. The first one is actually in Melbourne. You can still buy in Melbourne for under 500,000. And yes, the area is Melton. Now I've done a bit of a deep dive in Melton in one of my previous videos. So please go and check that out if you want to understand the fundamentals of Melton, because I go into a bit more detail there. So what I see here in Melton, so let's look at the market pressure, right? So I've taken 4 suburbs where you can still find something under 500,000. So Melton South, Melton, Kurrajong, and Melton West, right? So if I look at their sales days on market, I can see a clear trend, stabilizing trend. I don't see this increasing. It's just stabilizing around 30 days, 30 to 40 days, which is a healthy market. The interesting thing comes here. When I see this listings volume in the Melton region, what I see is that listings starting to drop, right? I can see that sitting around 60 to 80 listings around the early part of January 2024. And that's starting to drop here, except for Melton South, which has shown a bit of an increase. The other suburbs here, like Melton West, Melton and Kurrajong, the listings is starting to drop. Now, when I look at the inventory here, similarly, I can see that the inventory is dropping in Melton West, Melton and Kurrajong from about 5 months of inventory to less than 2 months of inventory. So that means that market is slowly turning. Okay, we're not going to see properties sitting there for too long on the market. Let's just look at the vacancy rate. Now, we know that the market is turning because the sales days on market is very healthy, and we're seeing stock reducing. We're seeing the inventory starting to reduce, which is a sign that the market is picking up on the ground. I'm seeing some competition for properties. There are offers, multiple offers coming on properties. Most properties are going for auction as well. It's not very easy to get something under 500,000. The big question though with Melton is the vacancy rates. You know, it's an area with high supply, so we got to be careful around the vacancy rate. So when I look at the vacancy rates again, Kurrajong, Melton West, Melton around 2%, 2.84%, and Melton South, look at this, around 7.15%. So clearly Melton South, the vacancy rate is really high. Melton, not as low as the other suburbs in Melton, so Kurrajong, Melton West and Melton, not as low as we would like because it's sitting around 2.84%, but still under acceptable levels. So how do we mitigate this risk? I think if you're looking for properties in Melton under 500,000, look for properties that are already tenanted, which have long-term tenants in place. In that way, your property doesn't have to be vacant for too long, and you don't have to search for a tenant. And then the other thing, of course, is I'm just going to load up Google Maps here. When we are buying in Melton, stick to the established areas, which is around that Melton CBD area, really. So this is the Melton CBD area. So we have the Melton region here. We have Melton West around here, Kurrajong is around here. Stick to the area around the CBD. When you go out into the outer suburbs where there are newer properties, more land supply, there tend to be more vacant properties. So stick to the established part of Melton and try to be as close as possible to the CBD area, just because it's the more established area, right? What can you buy under 500,000? Now, when you go to realestate.com and turn on map view, I can automatically see here not many opportunities under 500,000, right? I'm just going to click this here. So there's no data here. This one says 500 to 550. This is not applicable. This one says 489 to 519. And then this one says 500 to 550. So in fact, nothing on the market at the moment, which is under 500,000. So how do you find these under 500,000 opportunities? Call the agents. Okay. The agents have off-market properties, probably with tenants that they don't want to put on the market and still are under $500,000. In fact, when we were calling the agents last week, looking at a property for a client, we were getting 1 or 2 properties which were under 500,000 that were already tenanted. Okay, so you got to call all the agents. It takes time, but you can get some properties if you put in the effort to call the agents and get these off-market properties, because nothing on the market is available for under 500,000. If I go to the sold section here and look at what can you buy under 500,000. So let's look at what you can typically buy here. So this one sold for 466,000 in Melton, a 3-bed 1-bath, pretty decent condition, not bad. This one sold for 460, 585. So it's typically those houses that were built in the 1980s, somewhat old. So those are the properties that you can find 3-bed 1-bath in around 500 meter square block of land. You can find it between around 460 to around 490. That's the price point that we're looking at. And it's hard to find them on market. So call the agents to get these off-market deals. That's Melton. I think there's opportunity here. Definitely. It's a market that was very, very cool a few months ago when I was looking at Melton. Properties were sitting in the market for for quite a while, but that's changing now. I'm not really seeing properties sitting too long on the market. It's slowly changing, and it's only a matter of time before you find nothing under 500,000. The next region that I want to talk about is Berat. Okay, now I've done a deep dive video on Berat as well, so make sure you check that out. And so Berat is one of those markets which actually went back in value between 22 and 2025. There was a price decline of around 9-10%, right? So if I look at these areas in Berat, so I've taken 4 suburbs in Berat, Venduri, Sebastopol, Redan, and Delacombe, where you can find properties under 500,000. And this is exactly what I was talking about, a market decline that's happening here. It was dropping in value. So let's look at the sales days on market. So sales days on market had been increasing, but it's starting to stabilize for these suburbs. Here's where it gets less interesting again, the listings. Okay, listings are starting to drop, especially for suburbs like Sebastopol, Venduri. I'm starting to see this drop, right? Even for these suburbs like Delacombe and Redan, it is moving down. When I look at the inventory, I can also see a very sharp change in the inventory from about 4 to 5, 6, 7 months to only about 1 to 2 months. So that's a change in the inventory. Okay, so I also noticed this change on the ground when I was looking for properties in December, January. The property was sitting on the market for 2 to 3 weeks. Now it's gone within a matter of days. Okay, so this is telling me that the market is changing, and it's only a matter of time before price growth actually starts happening. Right, we're not into very hot market conditions yet, so there's still opportunity here to buy it at a good price. So if you look at that Berat region, let me just open this up here. So this is the Berat region. Let me just zoom in. You can see that this is the kind of the Berat CBD area, and if you want to look at the suburbs under 500,000, then you have suburbs like Redan, Canadian, Sebastopol, Delacombe, and then there's Venduri on the north. So they're all within that 10-minute radius of the Berat CBD. They're all pretty established suburbs. You'd find older houses here for between that 450 to 500,000. So what can you find here? So this one sold in Sebastopol, 475,000. It's an old property, right? So we are talking about properties that were built maybe in the 60s, even 50s. So properties that are 60, 70 years old. Let's look at one more property. Yeah, this one sold at 462,000 in Sebastopol. Okay, this one looks to be in slightly better condition. One more, this is a brick home in Sebastopol. This sold at 460,000 and it looks to be in decent condition. However, the age of the home would be around 50, 60 years, right? So one of the things that you have to be careful when you're buying properties in Berat is that the age of the home, right? We're looking at much older properties, so building and pest it becomes very important. You want to look at the structural aspects of the property. You want to buy a property that doesn't need too much of maintenance in the long run. That's the opportunities I'm seeing with Berat. Yes, there are opportunities under 500,000, but I don't expect them to be last for too long. Yep. So these are the buying opportunities here in Berat. If I do a cash flow, let me show you Berat. So both Melton and Berat, the cash flow or the yield is around 4%. So slightly lower rental yields than what you would like. So if let's say you buy a property either in Melton or Berat for 480,000 and rent it out for 420 per week, you would be negatively geared at a 6.50 interest rate, a 10% deposit. You're negatively geared by around 13,558 per annum. So you have to make sure that you're comfortable with that level of cash flow. You are negatively geared, but then there's also that growth that will happen in this market. Let's move on to the last market. Now I want to talk about Wodonga. Okay, so Wodonga is just on the border, NSW Victorian border. Okay, when I look at Wodonga, what I see here is, yes, similar kind of situation. Like if I look at the prices here, there's a bit of stagnation in the price. Let's just look at the sales listing for houses. The sales listing, when I look at Wodonga, I don't see a kind of a very significant change. It's kind of been quite steady. The inventory kind of follows the same trend. It's moving around, yes, but Wodonga is quite steady. Now it's dropping down to 1.8. And so I think this is a market that's kind of balanced. It's not too hot. It's not too cold either. And what I feel would happen in Wodonga is in particularly because the adjacent market, which is Albury, that market is hot. It's probably one of the hottest markets in NSW, right? and that heat would start transferring to Wodonga. At the moment, yes, you can still find opportunities under 500,000 in Wodonga, but it's only a matter of time before you can't find anything under 500,000, because being just across the border, I think that heat, the momentum, and that urgency would also come into Wodonga eventually, right? So we can still find properties under 500,000. In fact, just yesterday I was looking at a property for a client for around 460,000 and renting out for $450 per week. This is a brick home on a 500-600 meter square block of land, and so this is what you can buy under 500,000 in Wodonga. This one sold at 469. However, it was in March 2025. Okay, over the last 2 months, the market's changed a bit, so you can still find decent homes in Wodonga where the market isn't too hot, super hot. And I guess that is the summary of the three markets. All three markets have some commonality in the sense that they are buying opportunities here. They're not too hot. There's still opportunity to buy them. And I think if you can buy them now, then you can expect price growth to happen in the future. I've done a similar video where, how to place offers on property. That was the last video I did. So if you want to know how to narrow down the market and then how to find a property in a market, then just go and check that video, which I just did. I think you'll find that useful. And that's about it for this video. Please like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in my next one. Thanks.